doing it that way. So that's.
Well, Vivs, I want you to be a guest speaker in my African American history class.
No problem.
Because I think they believe most of what I say, but.
I started the club in '85 at Princeton High School, Black History Club.
Yeah.
1985. Princeton High School. I'll even put the picture up of the kids when I took them on their a field trip. We went into New York City because I went to the principal and said, I want to take my students to New York City. And he said, okay, go order the bus. We ordered a bus and we went in and we walked around downtown because I didn't have any money. And I got my supervisor to loan me $40 so I could take them on the subway. And I took them up to Harlem on the subway in 1985. And we walked around Harlem. And if those of you who were in Harlem in the 80s know what that was like. And so that was a rude awakening for the Black kids of Princeton, you know, to walk around the streets. And I lost one kid on the subway.
Oh, no.
Oh my God.
You guys are all sworn in secrecy, by the way.
I would have had a heart attack.
Facebook friend, and I taught his grandson the last year before I retired. But bruh, in a heartbeat. But that's what I'm saying. When we look at what this is all about and what we can do, I think part of the problem that I found in 30 years of education, or 33 years of public education, is oftentimes we just felt that the task was overwhelming. And I'm talking about the people on the other side of the teacher's desk. We had so much going on. You know, I to this day, I still do my laundry on Thursday because I had, and this was in Princeton, 2 miles from campus. I had students who they knew on Wednesday and Thursday they could bring their clothes, and they brought it to me in a little garbage bag, and I put it in my car, and I always went to the laundromat in the Princeton Shopping Center and did laundry on Thursday. I've been retired for 5 years now, and I still do my laundry on Thursday because I wanted them to have clean clothes on the weekends.
You got me there. I've never done any of my kids' laundry. You got me there.
Lots of quarters.
I agree completely. I think if there are ways that we can expand this to become a resource, you know, and you know, the whole role of a mentor, I think, is something that, you know, I've been thinking a lot about, because I know that the mentors in my own life, you know, have made the biggest difference, and that can happen online now in expansive ways. I mean, I'm in Sydney, Australia, you know, but I just feel hungry to be able to help. I mean, I feel this is actually generating an even greater sense of urgency, you know, hearing all of you speak about this. And, you know, we're speaking to the sort of the importance of one-to-one relationships. And now those can happen in this way that's very sort of expansive. And that's the benefit, you know, that's the one benefit of the technology. So, you know, I feel like the sense of depth that can come out of beginning to communicate and have relationships with students at deeper levels is something that could actually be a positive outcome of this, you know, this whole situation.
I want to say, I want to tell a real quick positive story, because I gave such a downer story a minute ago. Kid I coached as JV football coach a couple years ago, a real charming kid who can talk his way out of any trouble. Wanders the hallways a lot, fails a lot of classes, kept him eligible for football his freshman year. I didn't have him in sports or in a class his sophomore year. And now he's a junior. I have him in my English class. And I kept telling him, I kept taking him one-on-one and saying, I said this to the whole class, I would take him one-on-one and tell him, just for emphasis, if you don't write your essays, you're going to fail. If you need help on your essays, I'll help you with the essays, but you need to do your essays.
Got to do the work.
And he thought that because we had a good relationship as, you know, player coach, that I was going to pass him, because I kept telling him, even though I love you, I will fail you if you don't do the essays. I'll help you with the essays, but you got to do the essays. He didn't do the essays. He failed first marking period. All right, second marking period, he did all his work. He came to me for extra help to make sure his second drafts were perfect. And he got an A+ the second marking period. And I talked him into coming out for wrestling. So now I finally have a taste of normalcy, things starting to get back to normal. the last 21 days I've been coaching wrestling in person, and that's been an amazing relief to this this COVID total downer. So so yeah, it's things are starting to get back to normal. We're still remote, but hopefully we get vaccinated, Wiz, and the teachers unions will be glad to get back to work. We're dying to get back to work if we get vaccinated, and our buildings, which are, some of them are 100 years old, 90 years old, 80 years old. My building's 60 years old. They have little or no ventilation, and a lot of problems with asbestos and other issues. They're very dilapidated buildings. So, you know, if it's safe, we'd love to go back. The buildings are not safe, and but I will go back if I'm vaccinated. Is the
That's a good point.
yeah.
That's a good point.
How many of us, our school ran out of toilet paper and paper towels with a month to go in the semester, every semester.
Yeah, and soap, you know, the
And
idea that
so there was no hand soap in the bathrooms. You were out of paper towels and toilet paper, and they say, well, we can't order more until such and such a date. Every semester we ran out.
Mhm.
And people go, well, why, you know, what is it with these schools?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine having the kind of supplies you would need now when, you know, all those ordinary things seemed so hard before.
They're going to leave it to
So-
teachers to go out and buy it.
Yeah. So thinking about going back to school, I was just wondering, Mike, is your school in person session? Are you doing it remote? What are you doing?
On Tuesday, we will resume 5-day-a-week in person.
What?
But we've been remote.
Where are you, Mike?
Philadelphia.
You're in Philly,
That's
right?
you're at a charter school in Philadelphia.
It's not a charter. It's a weird. It's technically a private
Alternative.
school with sliding scale tuition things. So
Oh,
we're serving a really disparate and wide socioeconomic range, wide range in lots of ways, but it's sort of very innovative.
well, it's non-union.
Non-union, that's right.
Right, all right. So the
Hey,
teachers
I know
union,
schools in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that like that.
Yeah, that's where I started my career, Bob.
Albuquerque has like 3 high schools with the sliding scale in Albuquerque.
Yeah. Yep, I was at one of them back in the day.
Hey, I was almost your colleague.
Oh, you are almost at Albuquerque Academy? Yeah.
Yep.
Bud Harper, the Princeton alum headmaster there.
Right.
For a
He
while, he was the
contacted me and
oldest
said,
man
"Hey,
to swim
kid,
the
you'd like to
English
make
Channel."
a difference, make a change? Are you looking to make a change?"
Yes.
And then I said,
I think that most of our schools are superbly preparing students for the 19th century, and
Right.
and so I
Exactly.
have felt uncomfortable in most of them, and I'm trying to break the mold a little bit.
Right.
that's why we're in education. We believe that we can change. We have belief. We have faith.
Yeah.
We do. And then sometimes we get stuck where it seems like the whole job at some public schools is not even preparing the kids for the last century, but just making sure that our attendance records are in perfect shape. And that's like the main focus of the day. And so then I can see wanting to kind of start over. And I'm thinking, you know, you name your school Revolution Schools, you're thinking of doing something new.
Yes, indeed.
2013, I went into the vice principal's office and I said, if you have your secretary call into my classroom one more time, 10 minutes into my class, remind me to submit my attendance, I'm coming down here with my laptop and you and I are going to have a conversation. That was the last time they called into my classroom. I was like, stop interrupting my class.
The thing that Larry mentioned, student teacher ratios are so out of whack.
Oh,
And until you can get one-on-one meaningful relationships, I think that's the only way to really leverage learning and engage kids at any level. And small is beautiful, right? It's
You know,
expensive, which is what sucks.
exactly.
And I've been in some schools that, and maybe I'm in one now that's going to run out of money, but my last school ran out of money. So, man, we need to approach it differently
Yeah.
I was
more
telling
equitably.
Laura last week, my last year, which was 2015, I had a class of 6th grade. I had 26 students in there. 11 had IEPs and I had 7 aides assigned
Wow.
to that class.
Wow.
And they told me they were doing me a favor because they kept it under 30.
Wow.
In fact,
Yeah.
I would rotate the aides so one of them would sit at my desk.
Hmm.
And you know what,
Because they're all standing in the way and the kids couldn't see the board.
I finally gave up after a bunch of things happened, but one of them was that, you know, we were routinely looking at daily numbers of 185 kids. If you have 5 different classes,
2 grade books.
you know, it's just, you're just not having that, not only that personal relationship, but any kind of way of tracking those kids besides checking that they're there. And that year I had 42 kids in advanced 7th grade English. So in advanced, the problem is that the kids actually usually do write the essays and everything. So then all of a sudden you're looking at, you know, 42. You know, if you have 5 classes, you don't assign everyone's essay to be due on the same day, because then you'd have 185 to grade at once.
Grade at once.
But, you know, having 42 kids in a classroom and then 52 minutes later, you've got 38 kids, it's just insane. And so, you know, it just seems like that's not what education should be.
And yet it is the education that we as a society are evidently willing to fund.
Right.
Will be fun.
In studying charter schools, you know, I see charter schools trying to solve that equation, but they do it either by cutting what teachers are paid, which allows them to do a smaller class, or doing online education where, you know, one teacher handles a whole bunch of students but only touches base with them once a week. Right. So they're working with the same equation that other schools are. Because that's the resources we're willing to provide as a society.
That's why I think this online and the pandemic will give us an opportunity maybe to totally rethink how American education is structured. Because we were talking yesterday, you know, for some kids, being online has been a godsend, either because they're introverts or because they really, really care about their education, and the classroom that they're in is just way too disruptive. And
or
so
because they've been bullied.
yeah.
Yep.
And so this is an opportunity that
Right.
maybe we Princetonians can take advantage of.
But wholehearted, you know, in the whole time that I've taught piano, I've sat with hundreds of students in duet, one-on-one. So everything that, you know, what you all are doing is like yeoman's work in the toughest circumstance. What I've been able to see and appreciate and be enlightened by in my observations of students has a lot to do with the fact that, number one, I'm using music. And the other is that I'm working one-on-one with my students. So could I do this? I've tried in larger groups, you know, it's been very, you know, very tough. Even a group as large as 5 or 6, when you're one-to-one, you're actually able to be a kind of support for that person in a, you know, interrelationally. Magic happens. It has redefined my own sense of what's possible, what makes us human. And a lot of that work had to do with students with, you know, what we call developmental disabilities. I don't even like using that word because I don't feel that, you know, what are we saying, you know, what are we comparing it to? My point is that there's this opportunity. Yeah, exactly, hugely. You know, I have a short video that I shared, you know, that is with a girl with Down syndrome. And that for me was a pivotal moment. It redefined me as a person, to see what was inside of her, to see something inside of a human being who was traditionally relegated to the fringes of society. You know, so when we talk about the IEPs and so on, you know, we're beginning to bring students with various developmental quote unquote issues, you know, into, but it's like, what's our larger perspective? What's our larger sense of what makes us, you know, human? And I've been able to see that, you know, it's like I've been able to get a glimpse of the deepest part of someone, and it is independent of all of the parameters, you know, by which we define you know, IQ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, even, you know, physical issues, blindness, autism, et cetera. It's like there is a sort of magic key, you know, doorway that can go into the heart. And I feel blessed because I am a musician and because music is a nonverbal language. So, you know, it allows someone to express a gamut of themselves, right? A huge, you know, I feel that I've been given that tool, which has helped me. But I could not agree more that I feel like if there's an opportunity now, you know, to take this opportunity to really start to question the fundamental assumptions of our educational system, and even of one's own beliefs, you know, I've had to myself. So I agree. I'm clearly passionate about it because I've seen what's possible. You know, I feel like I've seen what's possible.
Jessica, I want to say something about her video, and it would be great if we could provide that in some way, shape, or form for people to watch.
Yeah.
Can we post that to the class website?
I mean, I have it here. I was speaking with Lora about it. I can show at least part of it. It's a 3.5 minute video of a girl with Down syndrome who's 15, and myself, an improvised duet at the piano. It is, you know, thanks, Liz. It is revelatory because the sophistication that she expresses completely defied my belief systems, you know, and that's the kind of insight I feel like is going to buoy us. That's my sense. That's my sense.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you show us like the part of that video for now, and then we'll post the link for the whole thing for later.
Sure.
Why don't we do that now? We've been going for almost an hour. Why don't we watch that, because it is uplifting. It is hopeful. And then after that, let's take some of the questions, because I think a lot of people do have questions to pose to us. So Jessica, why don't you go ahead and show us that now?
Okay.
This will be our Today's Smile post.
I'm sorry, what's that?
No, on Facebook, I try to post something every day and I call it Today's Smile.
Oh, that's
that we all
beautiful.
need.
Yeah.
And so your video could be Today's Smile.
Bob, I'm moved by that.
Serious.
Thank you.
Today's Smile.
Well, this is my first time sharing something on Zoom, so I did send the link to Jordan in case I am not adept at this. So let me try. So this is a duet video with a girl with Down syndrome. Like I said, Hope Garner is her name. And she would often say, I don't have Down syndrome, I have up syndrome. So she and I are sitting at actually a cafe in front of an audience, improvising together. This is what you'll see. And I have to, let's see, okay. So yes, that's just the end of that video. And I'll post the link to it.
Can you see my smile?
Yeah, and we'll have to post the link to that because the whole thing is really.
The
yeah.
whole thing is incredible, you know.
They
I mean,
smile.
I would love people to see that, you know, to see it.
Yeah,
Here's the link.
I'll put that in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
We had said we would talk some about charter schools. It's come up a little bit. But I was thinking that since it is 6, maybe we should go to questions now and see if people have some questions about either charter schools or any of the other things. And Jordan, do you want to
Sure.
do the question part?
Sure. Just if people have questions that they want to ask, please raise your hand. We'll call on you in the order that your hands go up. And right now there's nothing. So
The
Just
control is
click
just
raise hand.
raising your hand. It's not there.
Jordan, can I ask a question?
Joel, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm just shouting. Okay. I mean, obviously, this has been incredibly traumatic for everyone, and I am so impressed and moved by the teachers and what you've done. Thank you. I think we all feel that way. Thank you for what you do for all of us and for the students. What do we need to do differently next time? Because I think that that this virus is just a coronavirus. There are other coronaviruses. There are 4 others that already circulate as common colds that probably were pandemic originally. This will happen again. So next time, what do we need to do differently?
I have some thoughts about that if I can jump in first. I think that we knew March 1st or March 13th. I think we had good reason to know that we were not going to be gathering in congregate spaces for a long period of time. But in schools, we acted like, oh, that's this week. We'll see about next week. This week we're up, but we'll see about next week. And we're still acting like that, right? You still have schools making decisions week by week by week. And so all of our focus went into like trying to prepare schoolrooms or trying to, you know, stock up enough hand sanitizer instead of making a plan to make sure that kids' needs got met over the long term and making a plan to make sure that childcare needs got met over the long term. We could have set up things like small pods where you have sibling groups, where you have 10 kids and there's sibling groups. So you're not having a lot of exposures across groups with, you know, low risk leaders, and then have those kids involved in their online teaching, but under the supervision of somebody other than their parents, so their parents could keep working, right? We could have done stuff like that. We could have done other things to meet kids' needs, and we didn't make that plan because we were doing short term.
So I have a question, and I think hand raising isn't working where you do it through an icon, but it seems to me like even before COVID, like kids had really lost a sense of what the purpose of an education is for. And, you know, I do a lot of mentoring youth. I've done some foster care and stuff like that. And, you know, like one young woman now has got 1 class, she'll get her high school diploma, and she's like, yeah, I should probably get that. And she doesn't even really go to the class. She's just skating through. And I said, well, are you learning anything? And she's like, no, not really, but I'll graduate. And the idea that graduation is supposed to indicate that you know something that you can do in the future, and then they go into college. I mean, I know someone who's $40,000 in debt from an unaccredited school that went under, right? And she just thought, well, having the diploma would mean that she got this work, but it was not even real stuff she was learning, or else it's like you can get a diploma for stuff that isn't really valuable. So how do we solve that problem? How do we convince kids that graduating means they'll go into a really exciting trade, or they'll get an apprenticeship somewhere, or they'll get they get into the next step? And how do we model that and convince them?
I think that's a really good question, because we see that with the kids who are more like, well, I'm going to say our kids, you know, kids with parents who have educations like ours. And we see them sometimes just doing school just to get into Princeton or get into some other school where like that's the point in itself, and they don't see the point beyond that or deeper than that. And then we see that even more with the kids who are at the other end of like academic motivation or skills, where they don't see the point of it in practical terms, or they don't see like what's a good thing for them to study and what's not, and I think that's a really good problem to bring up.
I'd like to talk about this from the sort of project-based learning point of view, which is the in our school, it comes out of a Montessori philosophy, hands-on education. And if your school is truly a learning community, you can really have students foster the kinds of relationships that can build into something that is more than just checking off that box and getting the diploma. And that's why I want to know a lot more about what Mike's school is doing, because we had a Montessori high school in Cleveland that sadly didn't make it. It's been replaced by one of our other independent schools that has put together a mastery school that really is interdisciplinary and based on an alternative curriculum that it's not just linear, that you're just not going to go, to be an art history major at Princeton, or you're not just going to go be an engineer. And that you really have to look at how these things tie in. And that's why STEM and STEAM programs, I think, are so important. And so the things that, my cousin Lora Jaffin is doing is so important. So I really think that there does have to be a focus that is non-linear, that's much more cooperative, that's much more problem solving in its application. And what Sue Gemmel has talked about is more sort of the vocation, what would have been called vo-tech, something that would have, that kind of looked down on, especially from the Ivy League. And we've got to really make an effort to say that being able to, fix your plumbing, rewire an outlet are important things.
Got to check.
Sue, I just put a link in the chat, and I'm sharing my screen right now because I think engagement matters way more than, and it even includes high stakes tests like APs and SATs. And maybe one of the benefits that could happen long-term from this pandemic is maybe more and more schools, including the super selective schools, are backing off from those ridiculous high stakes tests. And actually, this instrument was developed partly by Rob Brisk, class of 80 at Princeton, when he was at a school in Ohio. And we're using this. We have kids rate their different classes every 2 weeks to see the extent to which they're in the engaged quadrant, or in the bored quadrant, or in the grind quadrant. And I think a lot of Ivy-bound kids are slogging through the grind. And so I think we just have to use different measures and de-emphasize the ridiculous high-stakes tests that are just about cramming in information to be regurgitated.
It's really hard to get kids to engage in the learning process as opposed to the grade process.
So we could de-emphasize grades, maybe. I mean, there's something now called the mastery transcript that some of you might be at. I encourage people to look at the mastery transcript. We're going to do that, which doesn't create a list of grades and a GPA. It talks about competencies and learning targets that students have met with different degrees of facility. And colleges are starting to get used to it and starting to be able to process it. They don't necessarily know what to make of it right away, but I just think we need to break the mold, in my opinion.
I got interested in education originally before I came to Princeton. I went to an alternative high school that was an experimental high school back, 1978, right? That didn't have any grades, that didn't have any regular classes, where students designed classes where what you do at the end of a class is you'd write up your own evaluation of what you did, reporting what you'd learned. And that's the transcript Princeton got from me, right? And Princeton was fine with that. Okay. I didn't have a test in 2 years, my last 2 years, right? We've had those patterns. In fact, I've got a group of people that are working on writing a memoir of that school in the 7 years that it existed. But we can do things that are better for kids.
We have Heather and Clint Winters coming up with questions, by the way.
Have we finished with this topic and we want to move on to Heather?
I just wanted to say, you know, to just start with the simple question / assumption that there are intelligences in a person that are not measured by IQ
Like
tests.
pen and paper.
Exactly. There are intelligences in a person that we're not, you know, that are not being measured, you know, aren't measured in a traditional way.
Heather, are you on?
I am.
Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for this panel. As I think I've mentioned once before, my daughter's doing TFA next year, and she will be teaching middle school science in the Charlotte, Piedmont area of North Carolina. And I hope she will be as inspiring as Lora and others are on this panel. So I'm just almost in tears about how hard you all are giving back. And it's really inspirational. My question is, she's a graduating senior and writing her thesis at Princeton, I believe, on the remote learning and the disparate impact on economically disadvantaged families. And she's surveying families. So I was kind of curious, because it was hard to survey students, younger students, and a lot of issues around that. So I'm curious what you guys, what your feelings are, these panelists, on how it's impacting working poor families. It must be impossible because they have to go off to work. And I don't know what she's going to find, but I suspect the answer is this is really tough on the poorer families and harder on them.
Absolutely.
And supporting their kids. Just
it totally is. I have students. I have one student who was not getting anything done at home. She wasn't able to, when she was staying home alone with no parents there. So instead she's with her sister now. And what that means is that she's babysitting 5 kids the whole time that she's supposed to be in my classes. And kids that have difficult home situations, they just don't have options to make it better. It's difficult.
Right. And I mean, what Karen's talking about is partly, you know, at home, do they have a place to work? Do they have quiet to work in? But also on the school side, that, you know, the school where I was working when, you know, kind of fortunately wasn't there last year when it went remote, but talking to my colleagues, it's like the whole school at first was just doing it, as we were saying before, without a plan, like, oh, this is going to last for, you know, 2 weeks.
It'll be over in a month.
Yeah, they didn't really have a plan, but some of the plans were that all the teachers should stop counting any work, or all of the teachers should stop providing lessons that were where the kids were supposed to show up because some of the other kids wouldn't be able to do it. So it was very typical of a district like that, of when you do acknowledge that some of the kids don't have the things like the wireless set up yet, and some of the kids don't have the laptops or the Chromebooks yet, and we're going to distribute them. It's like, so then we should just not do any of it because it's not fair yet. And it just meant that they lost, you know, another couple weeks out of their school year that a better funded district wouldn't have lost. So the equity things just
I think that there are parts in New York, in the greater New York area, where kids don't have, I mean, kids have not had wireless. They share a laptop. I mean, how do 3 kids share one laptop and try to go to school, you know, and that, well, what I was actually going to say earlier is I think it is that before we get to the kids who don't have the assets or who are poor or who don't have the wherewithal in terms of the technology, you've got kids who just can't learn online. So it's wonderful for those kids who can learn online, but there are many kids who cannot learn, who are struggling. And that's a whole nother segment that we should be looking at, or somebody should be looking at in terms of what happens next.
Let's go to Clint.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, everybody. During one of the pauses in my regular working career, I decided to take up substitute teaching. And as difficult as it was, and the way kids wouldn't pay attention, or you know how kids act when they have a sub come in, my biggest, the thing I was most happy about when I talked to my teacher friends is I never had to deal with parents. So my question is to those on the panel, with this pandemic, helicopter parents didn't go away. I'd just be interested to know your experience with the parents. You were talking about how much you have to do already, and then you're probably getting emails and calls and stuff from people. So I'd just like to know what's that like?
It's a combination. It's a combination. I have had, we have, even though we're a, private school, because we do in Ohio, because of Ohio's situation, we do get state money. We do have to do the measure of academic progress, the MAP testing. We have children who have had to take the test at home, and they have made miraculous strides in their reading ability. And yet these same parents expect their child to be qualified for the IEP special accommodations and modifications. So we do have the helicopter parents that are right there. We have parents that are doing their children's homework and doing their tests. On the other hand, we have parents that are working in the same room with their laptop. You can hear them conducting their business on Zoom while you are trying to teach to a child on the same computer. And maybe there's another sibling in the other room. I have had parents come about my class. I'm teaching 7th and 8th grade social studies as well as language arts. I was trying to use the election as sort of the Constitution in real time. I was lambasted and accused of racism because I was going out of my way to be neutral and not show my true political views. And so I have a parent who's convinced that I am absolutely the opposite politically of what I am, because I was trying to be, flatline. And so we're all struggling. I mean, it's everything. It's across the board. We have that say, "Oh, she's so responsible, I don't have to do a thing," and then then are appalled and upset that they haven't, when they finally realize their child isn't doing any work, and it's our fault, even though we've been sending emails and weekly updates, et cetera, et cetera. So it falls into that, the teacher, the school, whatever. That's where the buck stops. We're supposed to fix it all. And I have kids in my class with autism, dyslexia, ADHD, some that are neuro, and I have, bless the small class size, I don't have a class that's more than 10 children. Actually, I take that back. My hybrid class is 7. My online history class is 17 kids. No, I'm sorry, 13 kids. So yeah, we the whole thing.
Yeah, can I just pop up of what Molly was saying? We talked about this a little bit yesterday, just as a panelist, and this has been coming up, but I haven't heard this from all y'all, so I appreciate this. But one of the things that we are hearing as teachers is how horrible we are being and how selfish we are being, that we aren't willing to lay down our lives and go back to the classroom before we've been vaccinated. We hear a lot of that rhetoric. We also have very supportive people who get it, but it's, the problem is that more and more and more, the inadequacies and the disparities of society in general are falling on the shoulders of the public schools, the teachers. And so in order to be ready for the next pandemic, well, do you have a minute? Because it's like, I mean, it would be wonderful if major systemic changes could occur. I'm all worked up. Oh God. But like from the comments about like, you know, well, what about the parents that have to work? Exactly. What do we do about that? What about the people who don't have money, who don't have internet access, who don't have healthcare, I mean, it's like, okay, does that mean that teachers need to go back to the classroom and like try and make it work? You know, at this point, I'm hoping that there's a reckoning that society in general is going to come to. That's what I'm hoping. Okay, I'm done.
It's like snow days, you know, they would blame it for snow days.
Okay, let's, we'll go, should we move on to the next question? That would be Tina.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'd call this educational or urban renewal, but here in Asheville, I've been working with a lot of the leaders in the Black community, and COVID has really given me a real fresh perspective that what we're facing now, they've been facing for 30 to 40 years. I've been talking to Black educators who've been teaching here for 40 years. And when we tore apart their neighborhoods, where they for years had relied on the fact that they could walk to church, walk to school, walk to their stores, and walk home, they were connected. And I'm only now appreciating how completely disrupted their lives were, and all of their connections to their teachers, to their ministers, were when they were shunted off into neighborhoods that seemed economically efficient, but that really destroyed the whole fabric of their social life. And what I've been hearing today is how important this small group interaction is, how important connections are, how important our social motivations are. And I'm not sure where I'm taking this, except I think it's a learning moment for us to think about how suddenly COVID has put something in the public limelight that some of our minority communities have been dealing with for decades, but we didn't have the language to even think about the cost of all that separation and lack of infrastructure for them. Anyway, I just wanted to share that thought.
Anybody want to comment on that?
It's, you know, it's funny as you're talking, Tina, in 1965, I was in the first class of inner city Columbus kids who were in the busing plan. So we walked to school, which was 2.5 blocks from my house. I got on a bus and I went out to the west side. And I spent more time on the bus getting back and forth than I did in the classroom. And the worst part is you had in the neighborhood I grew up in, these phenomenal Black teachers, many of whom had been teachers since, I remember my first grade teacher told us she started teaching when she was 14 because her grandmother sent her down south and she had more education than the teacher at the local school. So she had actually started teaching as a 14-year-old. And what they did was they took all the educated Black teachers out of the predominantly Black schools, sent them out to the suburbs. Well, then the tenured white teacher said, we're not going to Ohio Avenue Elementary School. So what you ended up with were all of these young teachers right out of school. My nephews and I grew up together. They're only 2, 3, and 5 years behind me. When my nephews got into the same elementary school, one of my nephews had a different teacher every year. Because if you remember, you never saw a pregnant teacher. So you get these young white women that would come to Ohio Avenue, and the first thing they did was they got married and they got pregnant so they could get out of there. And he is 3 years behind me. He had a different teacher for 4 years in a row because, and so when they talk about the busing plans and desegregation, it's like Black-owned businesses. You know, perfect example is Princeton. There were, you know, Mr. Tig with the ice business. There was their own laundromat. You had your own dry cleaners. And suddenly those establishments had to compete with the whites when after generations, they served the Black community.
Right.
So newer is not always better, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So you've got quite an education. I want you to write, write it up. And I'll buy the, no, just send me the first copy of the book.
I would just think right before COVID hit, I was about to embark on a social experiment to see if I had to live for a month without the internet and without my car, relying only on public transportation, how would that affect my network of friendships, my access to groups like this, my access to doctors, healthcare, if I wanted to go get training or anything. It was frightening when I even just tried to do that mentally and think about how much intellectual capital and access to healthcare capital, everything capital, that I lost the minute I lost those two things. It was just, wow.
After we both get vaccinated, come and visit me and I'll take you over. I have great nieces and nephews who live in those under those very safe, very conditions that you described. Now I'm getting all worked. Yeah, my great niece works at a Motel 6 as a maid, and she's never owned a car. She raised her kids. They don't have internet. I don't even think her kids really could tell you what cable is. You know, her 3 children. You know, she's never owned a car. She's never had medical insurance. Never. She's 46 years old and she has never had a job where she was paid and received any kind of health benefits.
You know, one of the things that this makes me think about is, you know, Bob was one of the first kids in his neighborhood in that busing program. Here in the Bay Area, one of my friends has pictures of when she and her siblings were the first Black kids bused to a different neighborhood school in Berkeley. You know, and that was, you know, around
lifetime,
you know, decades ago, and when that happened. And I think we grew up feeling like things were going to change. You know, we had, I went to elementary school with 2 Black kids in it, but then in middle school and high school, we had the kids that were bused to our school. And we really felt like this is the beginning of real change. And then if we're public school teachers now, we're seeing it's not, you know, nothing's better at all. And the different things that we've set up to try to fix that, like, you know, sometimes the charter schools are kind of aimed at giving better opportunities to the kids who aren't in a good school. And then it, you know, it ends up being that it's just another way that the poor kids and the Black kids and the other underserved kids get left out. And I think that's something that's just bizarrely frustrating, but also something that, you know, our age group cohort, I think, thought would change by now, given that we were experiencing some of those things like the busing, and thinking it was like we were on our way to that. Anyhow, that's
we have one more question from right now from Dave Smith. Dave, you need to unmute.
He was typing on chat too, I think.
Yeah, no, I put my hand back down, so go ahead with somebody else.
Okay, well, right now I have there's been an enormous amount of discussion in the chat. There's been a lot of discussion about charter schools, and it's 9:30, so I'm not sure that we want to start that right now, because we could be here for a long time. I'd like to suggest that we consider a future session on this if some of the people involved in this are willing to do it. And I'm not saying like next week, but, you know, at some point we might want to think about that. Let me also throw out an idea that sort of came into my head yesterday while we were doing the pre-call, which is we, as some of you know, and some people who are on this call are involved in the Confronting Racism working group that put itself together, and they meet. Mike, how often do you guys meet? Mike Salmonson?
I got to unmute myself.
It's
We meet generally every other week on Saturday afternoons. We actually have a call this Saturday coming up. So if you are interested in joining our working group, just shoot me an email.
That's not why I was asking you that question.
Oh, okay.
But no, Faye, please promote that.
Yep.
I was wondering, there was a lot of discussion yesterday about how great it was to just, chat about these things. And if there's any interest in a group of class educators getting together on an informal basis, I think we can make the class Zoom facility available to you to schedule calls, and it wouldn't be broadcast to the whole class. It wouldn't be
our own breakout group.
It would be basically your own great breakout group where you could do anything from just swap ideas to schmooze to try to come up with action plans or proposals. If that's something that people are interested in, just let me know offline, and we can see if that's something. And if it works for teachers, it could work for pretty much any other any other affinity group, or although I don't know that we want to get a group of lawyers together. That might be. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We might also think about, Jordan, we tried it using Slack. There's now something called Clubhouse, a way we could have affinity groups in between Zooms. And since part of your technology committee and amongst other things, Jordan.
Yeah.
But I could, right? We could think about that. Would it be helpful? Sorry, there's some noise in the background. Would it be helpful to have a way to communicate in an affinity group besides a set Zoom time?
I mean, we can. My suggestion would be let's see if people are interested in doing it, and then we can figure out the best way to communicate. I mean, we've used Slack a little bit, but not nearly as much as these Zoom calls. Anyway, I just throw that out there as another thing that the class could do. Mike?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to finish up by saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
My point in talking about that before was I wanted to tie into Bob's question before about potentially putting together a service program, which is one of the things that our Confronting Racism working group is trying to focus on, is what can we as a class do or among classes do to do the kind of programs that you were suggesting, Bob. So I'd love for you to come to one of our sessions and throw out your ideas, because that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to be doing.
You got it, my man.
Thanks, Mike.
I will send you the invite.
Ohio Avenue Elementary School. I'm going to get in touch with the principal. It's my alma mater.
Good.
And say I've got a bunch of Ivy Leaguers who want to make a difference. And we'll do a shoe drive for them if their kids get their reading scores up next year for Easter 2022. We'll do a shoe drive so every kid gets a new pair of shoes for Easter if they get their reading scores up.
Good.
Thanks,
So
Mike.
write it down before I forget.
Sorry to have interrupted you earlier. I tend to do that, don't I? One other question that did seem, or there have been questions in the chat that sort of coalesce around, it's an equity question, but it starts off with how do we fund the public schools so that they can do the job that they need to do for all of those kids? And related to that is not only is how do we make sure that there's enough funding out there so that if we have to go to a remote model again or continue this, that there is enough equipment, both laptops, computers, Wi-Fi, hotspots, all those things that the students need in order to participate in a fair way.
You need to change government in the way local and state government works.
Yeah. And a lot of it is just about that funding model. But I think you have to go back to Joel's question, like, what about the next time? This I think really highlighted a lot of the problems with schools. I think it highlights a lot of that big problem where we say the schools shouldn't have to be social workers. It's like, well, then who's supposed to be doing the social work? You know, I think it highlights that all of these things about child poverty, and maybe it is a time we're going to kind of have that rethinking of how it should be. But we're better, because we are going to be facing these issues again. They're not going to go away.
And I think there's the additional question of our future. How are our young, you know, they say, you know, our young people are our future, right? So how do we think proactively and frame these questions in the light of giving them the best possible opportunities to become, you know, I'm going to say our saviors, you know, frankly, because it's going to take something completely outside, I think, of what we have traditionally called education in general, in order to prepare kids now for the, you know, things aren't what they were even 10 years ago, you know, for the challenges that we face. So our lives, you know, the world, I believe, really depends upon us, you know, pursuing what we're talking about, and in the biggest possible context we can frame it.
You know, to put a positive,
sorry, go ahead.
I didn't cut you off, but you know, to put a positive spin on that, I'm on Facebook with a large number of my former students that cover 3 generations, and I bet our teachers had the same concerns about us as we're having about them and what they'll grow up to be. And the beauty of Facebook is I get to go on there every day and see what kind of amazing adults my students are. You know, I have former students who are teachers of the year. One of my former students and lacrosse players, she just won an award at Stetson. She teaches music, vocal music. If you know Blues Traveler, I taught John Popper and Chad Kinchela. If you know the Spin Doctors, I taught Chris Gross. And but to see these kids go on, and they're teachers and coaches now, and they're police. You know, one of my former students was just named the police officer of the year in New Jersey. I got that email and shared it earlier today, you know, and so, you know, I've got to put a positive spin on it. There's nothing better than being a school teacher, nothing better in this world, because we see the possibilities in them before they see it in themselves.
Well, exactly right, Bob, right.
And to get an email this afternoon from a young lady who just got a job coaching soccer, and she says that very thing to me. Gina DeAngeli said, Mr. Vivens, you believed in me when nobody else did, including myself. And I've got it right here on my laptop to show it to you. She sent it to me 20 minutes before we started this session.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, we see the possibility in them before they see it in themselves.
Exactly, Bob. But that is the most beautiful thing, you know, that a teacher can do. I mean, it's gorgeous. Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I think that I'd really love to end the panel on an optimistic note. So I kind of like to wrap things up right now. And I think there's other topics that people still have a lot of things to say about. I think that it'd be great if we thought about maybe having another session on a different part of education. We could go into more detail about something else, but also working on the things like a class project in conjunction with what Mike's doing. So I'd like to see if, Jordan, if we can talk about like how people should communicate what they'd like to do next. Like,
sure. Well, the easiest way is probably to contact me, but also they can copy you because it's email, and they can copy as many people as possible. You know, my class email is Tiger. What is it now? Tiger 82 secretary at gmail.com. Tiger 82 secretary at gmail.com. But it's pretty easy to find. So you can feel free to reach out to me, and we can continue this discussion at another time online. And oh, there it is. Thank you. Tiger82 secretary at gmail.com. Look at it. He rips, he tears out my columns. I am so, thank you, Jeff. Thank you. You make me very happy.
We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
Thank you. You guys are all very worthy. This has been great. I really appreciate everybody's participation. I think we've had some interesting discussions.
There might be a possibility if they really want to push this for, we have our 40th reunion.
Yes.
And, you can get in touch with the program chair and the alumni faculty forum chairs for 2022 and really push this. That would be a good thing to do as well, because this is a subject that doesn't even get near the ink that it has to at reunion alumni faculty forum panels. It's usually on post-secondary education. It's never about the little kids. So that's another avenue you guys should probably explore.
That's a great idea, Chris. So let's keep this discussion going. The more stuff we do as a class, the better it is, and I think the more fun it can be. And I clearly think so, because we've been doing these things for almost a year now. We're for the 27 people who are still on the call, we are still trying to put together 82 Day next month, details to follow. And we're working on our next 82 Together online programming for the next month or so. So thank you very much, and have a good night, everybody.
Thank you all so much. It was great.
Fantastic.
Be blessed.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Be blessed.
It was really good.